Hey guys, welcome back to Goatman. My name is Joe Barlow, and today I've got another project deconstruction for you. This week we'll be doing a Hulk transformation from The Incredible Hulk. This is part of an ongoing series where I attempt to recreate a visual effect from every single Marvel film. If you want to catch these before I do the project deconstructions, then be sure to follow me over on Instagram, link in the description. But if you've not seen this effect yet, then don't worry, here it is. Right, so normally I start these videos by showing you the references, and we'll get to that, but I just want to show you the sequence first. Usually I like to just do the one shot, the one visual effect from the film, but in this example I had to do sort of a scene to sort of show the different stages of the Hulk transformation, which is the effect that I'll be covering today. Now, I pulled from references all over the film, and each shot sort of pulls from a different scene, so let's just go through them. We start with me meditating. Now this is just no effects, just to build the scene, and this happens in The Incredible Hulk. We then get these two shots. Now this is me opening my eyes and a close-up of my eyes, and this is pulling from a scene right at the end of the film where Edward Norton is meditating, and we get this this sort of eye shot of him, days without incidents, and then bang, his eyes are green and they sort of adjust slightly, and I wanted to cover that, which we'll get to a little bit later on. I'll show you how I did that. But then we get this shot. Now this isn't directly referencing any shot from The Incredible Hulk, but more so Avengers Infinity War, because we don't really see the Hulk transform too much in this film. They do try and hide it, and I understand why they do that. It's obviously a difficult effect to pull off for the time period. They do sort of show this shot, which, you know, that looks great, but a little bit later on kind of looks goofy, and if, you know, a big production company made it look like that, then I knew I wasn't going to be able to sort of pull this off. So I avoided doing that extent of transformation. So I did some sort of skin color changes for this, and I also morphed my face. Again, we'll show you that a little later on. We then had this shot. Now this is directly referencing the opening scene from The Incredible Hulk, the title scene, where Bruce actually goes through the entire Hulk transformation for the first time when he was like infected with the gamma rays. I'd forgot in this film that they sort of just skipped over all of that, and he was already the Hulk and everything sort of happened. But there's these great POV shots here. You can sort of see this echo around the edge, and it's something I wanted to try. I felt like it was trying to do an eyeball. Then you get these sort of hands pop in. So I referenced this a little bit in my video, my sequence here. And then these last two shots were just sort of blank palettes because I wanted to create a full 3D Hulk model, which we'll see towards the end of this video how I managed that. So let's take a look at the first shot here, the eye shot. So in the sequence it ended up looking like this. We get a little bit of the eyes coming in this shot, but then it's mostly in this shot, and you'll see they just sort of bulge and twist. So if we just go into this and take a look at everything, it's kind of messy, this sequence. So all I actually did to this was drop on an iris for each. These are obviously colored green with hue and saturation there, and I also added a bulge and a twirl. And what that's doing is, well, the bulge is making the iris bulge in and out, and the twirl is just making it look like it's adjusting. So obviously when the pupil adjusts in real life, it twists and contracts, and I wanted to definitely get some of that movement in like that. So that's what we ended up with for that. I think this shot worked great. It's just a simple eye replacement. The only other thing I did to this particular scene is obviously I had to color grade it slightly because my lighting was nice and green here, but it wasn't so much in this shot, so I did adjust that at the end. So here is our next shot. Now, I'm not a fan of this shot that I did. What we've got is my skin turning green and a little bit of a face morph. There's also a little bit of a face morph in there when you sort of get sort of half a face in, and then that overall face morph at the end, and sort of this scream. I'm really not a fan of what I did here, but let's just talk you through how exactly I made that. So I started off by rotoscoping the sort of skin areas of me, any sort of skin that was visible, and that was to get a plate for me to turn green. So this is what that looked like. I had a rotoscope of my head, I did my arms separately, and then I got a hue and saturation to adjust it to green, and a few other different color settings there to get the sort of specific green that I wanted. And then within my sequence, once that had been pre-comped, I just used a simple mask to bleed that on and off as and when I wanted it. So towards the end of the shot, my face turns into the Incredible Hulk, and the way I did that was just drop a picture of the Hulk and mesh warp it to my face, a little bit of tracking there and a little bit of a morph, trying to match up those lips there, and bring it in so it sort of just morphs into my face. Let's just take a little watch back of that. So there's what that looked like. A pretty clean morph, apart from the teeth at this sort of section. It also does fade in, but I also added this adjustment layer so it gets sort of that echo of the raw. It was a sound effect I knew I was going to be using. And that's sort of what that scene looks like for the color of the skin changing, and then finally the Hulk. Now our next shot does a couple of things similar to the previous. We've got a rotoscope on there with the color changing, but we've also got some other things going on. So let's take a look through this one. As I've just mentioned, we've got that rotoscope green sort of thing going on there. Again, that's just two masks with that sort of color green bleeding on, and that's just to sort of show the transformation is happening there. But the cool things about this scene, I think, are the irises. Now this was something I picked up from the actual scene, from the film, the opening scene that I just showed you a little earlier on, of sort of this iris sort of echoing. So I went ahead and added an iris, and that was just around the edge there with a little bit of a mask, sort of clean up this middle section. But I did go ahead and add a second one, and this one I added a wiggle to it, which you can see here, and this is scaling up and down, and that gives that sort of distortion, vibration sort of thing. I feel like we saw that a little bit in the reference shot, and I did want to sort of replicate that, because so far I've not really referenced anything specifically from the Hulk. So far we've had that eye shot, the transformation shot, and then that sort of POV shot. All of this I see as sort of filler for this video, just to sort of build up the scene. The Hulk generally is a sort of slow transaction to complete final form Hulk, which is what we'll see in the next shot. Now this I created by using some 3D models and some 3D animation. So let's take a look at this. It's probably one of the cooler shots from the sequence. I think I blended him pretty well into the back plate there. And the way I did this was using a program called Character Creator 3. So this is my model here. Now this isn't a program I've used before. I've used a couple of different character creators and they do work fairly similar, but what we have is this 3D model that I made of sort of a maxed out bodybuilder. We've got absolutely massive muscles on him, a ridiculous amount, a basic generic face, kind of a similar hairstyle to mine, and of course underwear there just to sort of save his privacy. Now the way this works is you effectively adjust each section of this with sliders over here, so we can max up the waist, the hips, the glutes, the legs, the foot, and I've pretty much sort of built him the way I wanted him. You know, we've got that muscle definition in the shoulders. It's kind of unrealistic, but you know, that's what the Hulk looks like. Now with this 3D model, I exported it and then I took it into Mixamo. Now Mixamo is an Adobe based animation. It's got all these preset animations. You drop your character model in there, and it rigs it up for you, and we have that animation. And this saves me a lot of effort on animating a character. I found this great collection of mutants which sort of worked out for the Hulk, and I got this roaring animation, and this is one of the ones I use. I also use the jump in, but there's loads in here. This is just the mutant selection. If we get rid of that as a tag, you'll see there's a bunch here referencing different things. We've got sort of superhero things, soldiers, generic poses, all sorts of things. And we can download this and take it into Blender, and that's exactly what I did. So once we had it in Blender, it meant I could export it as an OBJ sequence, and that meant I could bring it into this little bit of After Effects Element 3D. Now this is obviously Video Copilot's third-party 3D model software. There is a way to bring in the 3D sequences just up here, and that's exactly what I've done here. So we've got our Hulk, and I did texture it within Element 3D. There's some great materials that I picked from here, and it got me this guy. Now he doesn't really look too realistic, so that was the next step of blending him into the scene. So here's what the Hulk looked like once I dropped him into the scene. Obviously he doesn't blend into the scene at all at this point. He looks kind of choppy still, and there was a little bit of work to make him blend really nicely. So the first thing, of course, I did was change the lighting. Now I changed mine to dark. It kept him in the shadows, which is a trick they used in the normal film, so I definitely was gonna do the same here. I also added a shadow onto the wall here. Shadows and highlights are always a great way to sort of help the model interact with the 3D environment. As well as this, I also added a camera lens blur. This was just again to hide him a little bit, and then some levels to make him darker. And I think this sort of worked. You know, there's a little bit darker sort of environment here, not much light. You get a little bit of definition on the shoulders there, and you kind of get the idea that this is Hulk without sort of seeing too much of him. The only other thing that I did to this was scale him up throughout the shot. This was meant to be sort of the final transition between me and the Hulk. So this was me sort of as the Hulk, as a small human, and growing, and finally doing that animation. This was the raw animation from Mixamo, so he sort of leans forward and throws his arm back and then roars. And that's what that shot looks like after all that work to it. And that leads us on to this final shot here. Now this was a similar process. We had a blank plate to start with. Let's just take a quick look at that. We had this. I've added some blur to this just to sort of help give that depth and sort of a bit more focus on the Hulk. But from there, I've really built it in the same way. I've got my Hulk animation. Now this time, this was the jump animation, the mutant jump animation from Mixamo. I've gone ahead and added all the different sort of light and effects that I had to the other shot, you know, that sort of darken. I've added a shadow behind him to sort of match my previous shadow in the shot where you could see the back fall, as well as those camera blurs and the levels to sort of try and sort of semi-hide him, keep him set in the environment. Now what I've also done is duplicated that layer and added a pixel motion blur. Now the reason for this is to give the animation a little bit of motion blur to the entire comp. So here it is without, here it is with, and when it's in motion, let's try and get that going. It sort of just adds that sort of movement to the 3D model and does help blend it in the same way the shadows and the highlights do. So here's that jumper animation without that motion blur, and then once again with it. Now that was sort of everything we were going to do with the Hulk in this video. I did wimp out. I didn't want to show a lot of him. 3D model isn't, you know, 100% there, so I did sort of keep it in the shadows. And I did do a lot of work beforehand before revealing it, just to sort of build the scene. But that's what we ended up with. The very last bit of this video is just a bunch of debris and dusts from Action Essentials. And this is obviously because the Hulk was at this point jumping through the ceiling and destroying a little bit of the property here. So I also added some depth blurs and some camera shakes throughout, as well as the letterboxes, just to sort of help build the scene a little bit more. There's some camera movement here and obviously some camera shakes a bit later on when it gets a bit more aggressive in the shot there. Overall, not too proud of this. I like the work that I did with the Hulk towards the end there. I like that I sort of created him in Character Creator 3, as well as sort of building the animation there with the Mixamo and, you know, using a bit of Blender. But the sort of stuff before, not too happy with this. The eyes are fine, I like them, but they're pretty simple to do, and some I've done quite a bit of in the past, so yep, great. But this shot, don't like, would cut it out. And this one, yeah, it's fine, but it doesn't really get the message across that he is transforming into the Hulk, and it sort of does just sort of jump to this. It's a little bit disjointed, but you know, these are being made to sort of learn things from, and I like that I learned a little bit of the 3D stuff. So, you know, pros and cons.
And that was my Hulk transformation from the Incredible Hulk. As I mentioned at the start of the video, I am uploading these to Instagram before I do the project Deconstructions, so do be sure to follow me over there to see these first. Make sure you're subscribed here on YouTube though, because next week we'll be looking at the Bifrost effect from Thor. Until then though, goodbye.